Karen Henderson once told me, to my face, on my own porch, that I was a virus in this community. A virus. I'm gonna let that sit for a second. She spent 4 years trying to break me. Fines, liens, legal threats, all of it, every single dollar, because I put solar panels on my roof. My roof. The one I pay a mortgage on every single month. She thought she was the queen of this neighborhood. She walked around Maple Ridge like she'd built a place with her own hands, like that clubhouse, right there, the one with the columns and the little HOA crest on the door, like it was her personal throne room. But here's the thing about Karen. While she was out measuring the height of my grass with an actual tape measure, I'm not making that up, we'll get to it. I was sitting in my home office at 11 o'clock at night, going through county land records, and I found something. Look, I'm not going to pretend I knew exactly where this was going when I started. I didn't. I just knew that somewhere in the paperwork, there's always something in the paperwork, there was a way to make this right. There's a funny thing about property law. Sometimes the person who builds the house doesn't actually own the dirt underneath it. I didn't drive to that board meeting to pay my fines. I came to tell them their lease had expired. I'm standing on Maple Ridge Drive right now, and today, the HOA is officially my tenant. Let me show you how I bought an entire neighborhood to make one woman regret every dollar she ever took from me. Okay, so, to understand what I built, you gotta understand what was done to me first. And I know. Every guy with a grudge says that. Bear with me. This doesn't start in a courtroom. It doesn't start with some dramatic confrontation. It starts on a Tuesday morning in March of 2019, when a crew showed up at my house and put 12 solar panels on my roof. That's it. That's the inciting incident. 12 panels. Let me paint you a picture of who I was at this point. I bought my house at 14 Creston Drive in November of 2017. Paid $342,000. Put 25% down. Moved in on a Wednesday. By profession, I'm a real estate attorney. By nature, I'm the neighbor you genuinely forget exists. I don't go to pool parties. I don't join the newsletter committee. I renovate, I work, I keep to myself. Looking back, I probably should have just moved when things got bad, but I'm stubborn, always have been. So, January of 2019, I submitted a formal renovation application to the Architectural Review Committee. The ARC, 12 flush-mounted solar panels, south-facing roof. You couldn't even see them from the street. I submitted the full packet, contractor plans, mounting specs, product sheets, on January 14th. Now here's what matters. Under the HOA's own bylaws and our state's Solar Rights Act, the ARC had 30 days to respond. If they didn't respond in that window, the application was deemed approved. By law, automatically. Day 30, nothing. Day 45, nothing. Day 60, I sent a follow-up email. Polite, professional. One line came back from Karen Henderson, who was, by the way, simultaneously serving as ARC chair and board president, both at the same time, which is its own red flag. But anyway, her response: "Your application is under review. Please be patient." I wasn't patient. On March 15th, I had the panels installed because they were already legally approved. The silence was the approval. I wrote briefs on this exact statute for 3 years before I went into private practice. I knew what I was doing. The next morning, 7:43 a.m. My Ring camera has the timestamp if anyone wants to check. Karen Henderson was on my porch, pale blue zip-up, hair in a clip, and she's holding a clipboard, holding it out in front of her like it's a weapon, like she's about to knight me with it or something. She didn't knock, rang the bell once. When I opened the door, she said, word for word, I memorized it, Those panels are a violation of Section 4.7 of our CC and RS, and an eyesore that reduces property values for every family on this street. You had no approval. I am issuing a fine of $500 per day until they are removed." I could see the vein in her neck, just pulsing, and her jaw was tight, real tight, like she'd been rehearsing this in the car on the way over. I told her the application was deemed approved under state statute, and she looked at me. I want you to really picture this look. It's the look of someone who has never once had a person push back on them. Slightly confused, slightly insulted, like I'd said something in a language she found offensive. And she goes, "The statute doesn't apply here. Our CC and RS supersede state law." They don't. They legally cannot. She either knew that and didn't care, or she didn't know it and had no business running a board. Either way, she wasn't operating in the world of what's legal. She was operating in the world of what she could get away with. Here's where it gets real. Over the next several months, those daily fines just kept stacking, and buried in a 2011 amendment to the CC and RS. An amendment that most people on that street had never read, never voted on, and almost certainly never had explained to them, was a provision that let daily fines accrue interest and get lien directly against the property. No court order, no independent review, just Karen's board in a room most homeowners never walked into, voting on it. By September of 2019, the HOA had placed a lien on my home at 14 Creston Drive for $52,400. $52,400 for panels that were legally approved by their own silence. I know it sounds insane. It was insane. But here's what I need you to understand, and I mean really understand. That number isn't crazy because of what it did to me. I'm a real estate attorney. I know how to fight a lien. That number is crazy because of what it would have done to somebody who isn't me. A $52,000 lien on your home can trigger foreclosure proceedings. Most people don't have the money or the knowledge to fight it. Most people would have broken. They would have taken the panels down, paid whatever they could, swallowed the humiliation, and moved on. That's the mechanism. That's always been the mechanism. Karen Henderson knew exactly what she was deploying when she filed that lien. And that same week, she sent me an email. Last line said, "It would be in your best interest to remove the panels, pay the outstanding balance, and commit to working with this community rather than against it. Some people are simply not a good fit for Maple Ridge." I printed that email out, laminated it, put it in a drawer in my home office, took it out 18 months later, on the morning of the most important board meeting this neighborhood has ever seen, and handed it to my attorney as we walked into that room. But we'll get there. First, let me show you the math. The moment that lien hit my property, something shifted in how I was thinking about all this. It stopped being personal. It became a problem. And I've been solving financial problems my whole career. So I did what I always do. I opened a legal pad, drew a line down the middle, and started mapping out what a real solution actually looks like. Not a complaint to the state HOA board, not a petition, not a strongly worded letter to the neighborhood Facebook group. A structural solution, one that couldn't be appealed, amended, or voted away the next time Karen Henderson called an emergency meeting on Christmas Eve. I'm not joking. She called one on Christmas Eve. We'll get to that too. First things first, I retained outside litigation counsel, not my own firm. I wanted arm's length separation on this, and we challenged the lien in circuit court on 3 separate grounds: the Solar Rights Act preemption, the deemed approval doctrine, and procedural invalidity under their own bylaws, which required independent legal review before any lien over $10,000. That review had never happened. 8 weeks after filing, a circuit court judge vacated the lien. Entirely. Zero. Gone. Off my title. Now, a reasonable person at this point, a person who is not Karen Henderson, might have said, "Okay, we lost. Lesson learned. Let's move on." Karen Henderson held a special board meeting and voted to amend the CC and RS to close the deemed approval window. Passed 4-1. probably unenforceable against existing homeowners under the vested rights doctrine. But that's beside the point. The point is she was telling me, as clearly as she possibly could, that she would just rewrite the rules every time I found a way to play by them. Message received. I stopped planning my defense and started planning the end game. So during the lien litigation, I'd already pulled a complete title history on my property. Standard stuff. But there was a reference in the chain to the original 1987 subdivision plat that caught my eye. Something I hadn't seen before. So I pulled everything. Every recorded document associated with Maple Ridge, going back to the beginning. Title searches on all common area parcels. The original subdivision plat. HOA formation documents. Deed conveyances. Easement grants. Survey maps. This kind of work takes about 3 weeks if you know what you're looking for. Most people never do it. Most HOA residents have never even seen the document that created the legal entity that's been telling them what color to paint their shutters. And buried in the 1989 deed conveying the common area parcels to the HOA, I found a reversionary clause. Okay, if you're not a real estate attorney, let me explain this in plain English. A reversionary clause is a provision in a deed that causes ownership of property to snap back, to revert, to the original grantor or their successors if a specific condition gets triggered, like a tripwire in the paperwork. The property just comes back. The original developer of Maple Ridge was a company called Sovereign Land Partners, LLC. In Section 8C of their 1989 transfer deed, there was this language, and I'm paraphrasing from memory here, but the substance is exact. Title to the common area parcels shall revert to the grantor successors in interest in the event the HOA entity ceases to maintain the parcels consistent with the original subdivision covenants for a period exceeding 24 consecutive months. Sovereign Land Partners dissolved in 1994. Their assets, including any live reversionary interests, passed through 2 more corporate entities and then landed in a probate estate in 2011 that nobody ever fully administered. The reversionary interest had just been sitting there, legally valid, recorded in the county deed records, completely invisible, for over a decade. I know it sounds crazy, but stay with me. I found the estate through probate court records. I got a separate acquisitions attorney, again, total arm's length from my personal practice, to open negotiations on behalf of an unnamed client. Now look, a reversionary interest isn't a guaranteed ownership claim. It's contingent. It only activates if you can prove the trigger condition was met. So its value to the estate was basically theoretical. They didn't know what to do with it. It was just a weird line in some old paperwork to them. I bought it for $31,000. $31,000 for a contingent claim on the land beneath the clubhouse currently valued at over $2 million. But buying it was only step 1. To actually trigger the reversion, to flip that ownership switch, I had to prove the HOA failed to maintain the common area parcels per the 1987 covenants for at least 24 consecutive months. So had they. I spent the next 6 months building the file that would answer that. I hired a licensed property inspector, 3 separate assessments, conducted under the cover of prospective buyer inquiries on nearby properties. I pulled municipal code violation records going back 5 years. I filed public records requests for HOA maintenance invoices. I brought in a civil engineer specifically to assess the drainage infrastructure on the clubhouse parcel. And the findings. Look, I'm going to be honest. Even I was a little surprised by how bad it was. The pool deck, cracking failure, unremediated for 31 consecutive months. The drainage system on the clubhouse parcel, non-functional since at least early 2018. The perimeter fencing along the eastern easement boundary, out of compliance with the original 1987 specs since at least 2017. The reversionary condition hadn't just been met, it had been met multiple times, over multiple years, with a paper trail a mile long. Now, the reversionary claim was powerful, but real estate litigation moves slow. A quiet title action could take 2 or 3 years. I needed something running parallel. I needed leverage I could actually use at a meeting. So in October of 2019, same month I bought the reversionary interest, I formed Phoenix Property Holdings, LLC, Delaware registered, manager managed. I was listed as neither manager nor member in any public record you could pull by name search. Standard institutional privacy structure. Every major investment firm in the country operates this way. Completely legal, completely routine. Phoenix's stated purpose: acquire distressed and off-market residential properties in Maple Ridge for long-term rental. Phoenix's actual purpose: accumulate lots. Because here's the thing, buried in Section 11.3 of the Maple Ridge HOA's own governing documents, any entity owning 15% or more of the subdivision lots had the right to call a special meeting, introduce binding resolutions, and force a board election. Maple Ridge had 247 lots. 15% was 38 lots. I had 0. Let me tell you about the next 4 years. October 2019, Property 1, 22 Creston Drive. A widow named Marlene Forsyth. She'd been trying to sell for 8 months. Couldn't move it. The HOA had flagged her property for a minor fence setback violation, and every buyer who got to due diligence walked when they saw the open compliance issue. Phoenix came in at asking price. Cash. Closed in 11 days. Marlene moved to Scottsdale to be near her grandkids. She never knew my name. Honestly, I hope she's doing great. One property. 37 to go. December 2019. Properties 2 through 5. Over the holidays, Phoenix closed 4 more. A mix of off-market direct-to-owner deals, run through a broker I'd specifically retained for Maple Ridge, presenting as an independent buyer's rep. 1 estate sale, 1 foreclosure pre-auction. January 1st, 2020. Phoenix held 5 lots. 33 more to go. March 2020. Everything stops. I don't have to tell you what happened in March of 2020. You lived through it too. The pandemic hit this plan like a wall. The residential market froze overnight. Sellers disappeared. 2 of my Phoenix Capital partners pulled their commitments within 10 days of the WHO declaration. I was sitting on $1.9 million in acquisition debt, 5 properties, an interest clock that doesn't care about global pandemics, and no clear path to 38 lots. And I want to be honest here because I think it matters. There were about 3 weeks in April of 2020 where I genuinely thought about quitting. I had a legal pad on my kitchen table. 2 columns. Keep going. Walk away. And the walk away column had more in it. The math had gotten harder. The timeline had stretched out way longer than I'd originally figured. And if I'm being real with myself, the thing I was fighting, Karen Henderson's little empire, that lien that was already off my title but still sat in my chest like a stone. It felt, in those weeks, like maybe it wasn't worth what I was risking. I'm not ashamed to say that. It's the truth. And then a letter showed up, handwritten, from a man named Derek Williams, 89 Birchwood Court, far side of the subdivision. He'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Phoenix Property Holdings was buying houses in Maple Ridge, tracked down a P.O. box. His letter said Karen Henderson's board had fined him $8,000 for painting his front door a color that wasn't on the approved palette. Derek Williams is 67 years old, 2 tours of duty, retired, fixed income, 19 years in that house. Karen Henderson's board had started foreclosure proceedings over a door color. I put that letter in the drawer next to the laminated email. I never touched the walkaway column again. July 2020. Properties 6 through 14. Turns out the pandemic, like most market disruptions, eventually creates opportunity on the backside of it. Owners who were quietly underwater before COVID were drowning now. 3 absentee landlords in the subdivision, guys who'd bought in 2017 and 2018 thinking they'd flip, wanted out at any decent number. Phoenix was ready. Phoenix was liquid. Phoenix was patient. End of July, we held 14 lots. Fall 2020, the PI problem. Around October, my acquisitions broker called me from her car. She sounded rattled, and she's not someone who rattles easy. A man had approached her at a coffee shop near her office. He knew her name. He had a photo of her, taken from a distance, surveillance style. He was asking very specific questions about who she was working for and which entity was funding the Maple Ridge purchases. Karen Henderson had hired someone to pull the thread. Okay. So, this was a complication, not a catastrophe. Phoenix's legal structure was airtight. Everything we'd done was completely above board. But it told me she'd noticed the acquisition pattern and was trying to connect the dots back to me. I changed brokers. I introduced a second LLC, Meridian Residential Partners, as an intermediate holding entity. Phoenix funds Meridian. Meridian takes initial title. Properties transfer to Phoenix after a 90-day seasoning window. Extra layer, extra lag, but the thread stayed invisible. 2021, the grind. There's nothing cinematic about 2021. No dramatic moments. No close calls. Just slow, methodical, unglamorous accumulation. Properties 15 through 27 across 14 months. Direct purchases, contract assignments, 2 probate sales. 1 short sale that took 6 weeks of back and forth to close. I was personally reviewing every title commitment, every survey, every compliance history. Total capital deployed by Phoenix and its affiliates in 2021, $4.7 million. Running total, 27 properties, 11 more to go. Meanwhile, in December of 2020, the title litigation firm, completely separate from anything connected to my name, had filed the quiet title action asserting Phoenix's reversionary interest in the 2.3-acre clubhouse parcel. The HOA's attorneys filed a motion to dismiss. Denied. Discovery opened. And Karen Henderson still had no idea that the company suing her HOA over the clubhouse land and the company quietly buying up her neighbors' homes with the same person's vehicle. January through August 2022. Properties 28 through 37. The pending quiet title action had put a cloud over Maple Ridge that made it harder to sell into, which meant properties that had been sitting off market for years suddenly came available. Owners who'd been holding out decided they'd rather cash out than wait through years of litigation uncertainty. Phoenix closed 10 more in 8 months. 37 lots. 1 away. October 2022. Property 38. I didn't have to go looking for number 38. I already knew what it was. 89 Birchwood Court. Derek Williams' house. He didn't want to sell. I didn't want him to leave. Those 2 facts had to coexist, so I built a structure around them. Phoenix purchased the fee simple title to 89 Birchwood Court. Simultaneously, and this part matters, I executed a life estate deed, a recorded legal instrument reserving Derek's absolute right to live in that house for the rest of his life. Property taxes, maintenance, Phoenix covers it. When he passes, title returns to Phoenix in full. We also built in a retained right of first refusal, meaning if Phoenix ever decides to sell, Derek or his heirs get the first shot at buying it back at appraised value. Derek Williams kept his home, kept his dignity, stopped getting letters from Karen Henderson's attorneys. Phoenix acquired lot number 38, 38 properties, 15.4% of Maple Ridge. Reversionary claim on the clubhouse parcel, filed active, survived a motion to dismiss. 4 years, 3 months, and 11 days after Karen Henderson stood on my porch at 7:43 in the morning with a clipboard and a fine notice. It was time for the meeting. So, the Maple Ridge HOA Annual General Meeting. Every October in the clubhouse. Cheese plate, box Chardonnay if you get there early enough. Then the formal session. Board presents the financials, maintenance updates, upcoming projects. Somebody asks whether the pool hours are going to change for winter. Applause, adjournment. Everybody goes home. Historical attendance, about 30 people. On a good year, October 19th, 2022, 214 people showed up. I'd spent the 2 weeks before quietly reaching out to residents. Didn't tell M what was happening. Just said something significant was going to be raised at this meeting about the financial and governance future of the association, and they should be there if they cared about their property values. My broker made calls. A woman named Patricia Osei. She'd had her own war with Karen's board over a landscaping fine. 2 years of fighting. She activated the neighborhood Facebook group. 214 people. Folding chairs brought in from the storage closet. People standing along the walls. People in the doorway. Karen Henderson opened the meeting at 7 p.m. Blazer. Presentation ready. Slide 1 said, Maple Ridge, building a stronger tomorrow. I'm sitting 4th row. Gray jacket. Legal pad. I look like every other homeowner in the room. She didn't clock me at first. Our whole 3-year war had been conducted through attorneys and filings. She'd never actually had to look at me across a room before. She gets through the financial slides, gets through the maintenance report, announces the proposed assessment for the tennis pavilion roof, opens the floor for questions. I raised my hand. She called on me. I stood up and I said, just very calm, very neutral. Before we get to new business, I'd like to introduce some documentation for the record. My attorney, who'd been sitting 2 rows behind me, walked to the front of the room with a bound document set, handed a copy to each of the 5 board members, placed one in front of the HOA's general counsel at the side table, and I watched Karen Henderson watch him walk across the room, watched her face when she recognized him. She deposed him once, years back, watched the confusion, then the recognition, then something underneath both of those, like a person who's just stepped onto ice and is deciding, very carefully, how to move. The room got quiet, not polite meeting quiet, the other kind, the kind where everyone senses that what's happening isn't what was on the agenda. I gave M 90 seconds with the documents, 90 seconds to find the Phoenix ownership roster, to see their HOA's name on an active quiet title lawsuit, to find Section 8C of a deed from 1989 that nobody in that room had ever read in their life. The HOA's general counsel flipped to page 4, stopped, read it again, turned to Karen and said something I couldn't hear from where I was sitting. I didn't need to hear it. I knew exactly what he was reading. Then I spoke. Mrs. Henderson, I'll keep this brief because I think the documents speak for themselves. In January of 2019, I submitted a renovation application for solar panels at 14 Creston Drive. That application was approved by deemed consent under state law when your ARC didn't respond within the statutory window. Your board ignored that and placed a $52,400 lien on my home anyway. A circuit court vacated that lien 8 weeks later. Your response to losing in court was to rewrite the bylaws, and I want to be real precise about what that told me. It told me this board doesn't operate within the law. It operates within whatever version of the rules it can impose on people who don't have the time or resources to push back. So I'm going to tell you what I've been doing for the last 4 years, and I need you to listen carefully. The first document in your packet is a certified ownership roster. Phoenix Property Holdings and its affiliated entities hold fee simple title to 38 lots in this subdivision. 15.4% of all lots in Maple Ridge, under Section 11.3 of your own governing documents, that entitles the holder to call a special meeting, introduce binding resolutions, and demand a board election. I'm calling that meeting. Tonight is your notice. The second document is the active quiet title action, in which Phoenix is asserting reversionary ownership of the 2.3-acre parcel this clubhouse is sitting on right now, and the court order denying your motion to dismiss it. Your general counsel has the full docket. The third document is the maintenance assessment, the engineering report, the municipal code violations, 31 months of unremediated pool deck failure, 27 months of non-functional drainage on this specific parcel, fencing out of compliance since 2017. These are the exact conditions that trigger the reversionary clause in the 1989 transfer deed. They've been met. The documentation is thorough. And the fourth document, last page, is an email you sent me in September of 2019. I had it laminated. I'm not here to bulldoze a clubhouse. I want every single person in this room to hear that clearly. I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm here because Derek Williams on Birchwood Court almost lost his home over a door color. I'm here because Margaret Tran was fined $14,000 for a fence her contractor put 6 inches outside the setback. 6 inches. And your board liened her property before she'd even received written notice of the violation. I'm here because over the last 8 months I sat down with 41 homeowners in Maple Ridge and listened to 41 versions of the same story. People who were scared to plant the wrong flowers. People who repainted their shutters 3 times trying to find a color that wouldn't trigger a letter. People who stopped having friends over because they were afraid someone on this board would write it up as a noise complaint. That's what's been built here. Not a neighborhood, a system of fear run out of this room. I've got a term sheet. You've got 2 choices tonight. We litigate the reversionary claim, and I will win, because the maintenance failures are documented, sworn, and submitted. And this association burns through its reserve fund defending a deed from 1989 that your own predecessors forgot existed. Or we sit down this week. We negotiate a governance agreement. We reform the CC and RS. We put a resident advocate on the ARC. We create a public-facing fine database so every homeowner on this street knows exactly what their board is doing with their money. I drafted the terms already. They're in the packet. Maple Ridge is a good neighborhood. It deserves a board that acts like it. I sat down. The room was silent. Not for a second. For a while. Then Sandra Park, 3rd row. She'd been fighting a fence dispute for 2 solid years. Started clapping. And the room just came apart. 3 of the 5 board members stood up and physically moved away from the board table. Toward my attorney. Toward the term sheets. The HOA's general counsel had his phone out. He was calling somebody. Karen Henderson didn't move. Didn't look up. Just sat there staring at the table in front of her. The vein in her neck was going again. Same as the morning on my porch. But this time there was no clipboard. No fine notice. Nothing left to deploy. She didn't speak. The meeting never formally resumed. There was nothing left to say inside that room. Everybody could feel it. The way you feel a building when something structural has shifted inside the walls. 27 days later, they held the special election. Karen Henderson didn't file to run. New board seated in November of 2022. 5 members. 3 of them had personally been targeted by the previous administration. First act. Rescind all disputed compliance fines that predated the election. Second act. Commission an independent audit of the HOA's reserve fund. The audit came back with a $340,000 shortfall. 3 years of maintenance expenses understated in the financials they'd been presenting to homeowners. Nobody got charged criminally. Sloppy accounting, not fraudulent, the auditors said. But the number tells a story. That's where the monthly dues went. Not into infrastructure, not into reserves, into letters, fines, liens, attorneys, private investigators following my broker into coffee shops. The governance agreement we negotiated that November added 4 binding amendments to the Maple Ridge CC and RS. Independent legal review before any fine over $1,000. Mandatory mediation before any lien, with 30 days minimum notice. A resident advocate seat on the ARC, elected by homeowners, not handed out by the board. And a public-facing compliance database, updated monthly. So every homeowner could see every open complaint, every issued fine, every enforcement vote. And then one more thing. My request. Phoenix Property Holdings contributed $75,000 to the Maple Ridge Neighborhood Improvement Fund, designated for the pool deck, the clubhouse drainage system, the eastern boundary fencing, the exact maintenance failures that had triggered the reversionary clause. I fixed them. The legal ammunition that got me into that room. I used it to get in the door. And then I fixed the thing that made it work. Because look, the leverage was never the point. The leverage was the tool. The neighborhood was always the point. In return, Phoenix agreed to suspend the quiet title action permanently once the improvement work was done, and committed to a 10-year hold on all 38 properties. No rapid flip, no disruption, stable, professionally managed rentals. I got an email from Karen Henderson on a Sunday afternoon in December, 3 weeks after the new board's first meeting. 2 paragraphs. I'm not going to read the whole thing. She's a private citizen, even if she didn't extend that courtesy to me. But the last line said, "I don't expect you to accept this. but I am sorry for what I said to you in 2019 and for how I handled things. I was wrong. I read it twice. Didn't respond for 3 days. When I did, I wrote one sentence. I accept. Let's make sure this neighborhood deserves what it has. Meant every word. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a long fight. Somewhere around year 2 or 3, the mechanism takes over. The acquisitions, the legal moves, the documentation. It starts feeling like its own thing, separate from why you started. You gotta keep pulling yourself back to the original question. Why are you doing this? I started because of 12 solar panels and a woman who treated the law like a suggestion for other people. But I kept going because Derek Williams wrote me a letter at a kitchen table in April of 2020. Because Margaret Tran lost $14,000. Because Sandra Park spent 2 years fighting over a shrub. Because the person who doesn't have what I have, the legal background, the capital, the ability to spend 4 years quietly building something, that person still deserves to plant whatever flowers they want in front of their own house without being scared. That's what property rights are supposed to mean. That's what this was always about. I walk through Maple Ridge on Tuesday mornings now. Pool deck got repaired in the spring. Somebody planted lavender along the clubhouse path. Wasn't there before. Derek Williams is usually on his porch in the afternoons. He waves when I go by. Still just a neighborhood, but it belongs to the people who live in it again. If you watched this whole thing and felt something, that specific, tired, infuriating feeling of being told the rules don't quite apply to you the same way they apply to everybody else, you're not alone. HOA abuse isn't some niche problem. It's a nationwide thing hiding inside the fine print of documents you signed at your closing table. It happens in luxury subdivisions and starter home neighborhoods. It happens to veterans, teachers, nurses, young couples who spent every dollar they had just to get a place of their own. And it almost always happens to people who don't have the background or the resources to fight back. That's what this channel is for. Not to give everybody a law degree. Not to tell everybody to go buy 38 houses. But to make sure that when a board like Karen Henderson's operates in the dark, hiding behind fine print, filing $52,000 liens against solar panels, trying to foreclose on a veteran over a door color, somebody's shining a light on it. If you've ever been bullied by a board that thinks it's above the law, comment the word justice below. I read every story, every single one. And if you want to see what happened when we took on Richard Calloway, the board president who ran a fraudulent special assessment scheme trying to foreclose on a 34-year military veteran, hit subscribe. That case took 26 months, cost more than this one, and it ended in a way I still think about when I need to remember why this work matters. You're not going to want to miss it. My name is Klitschmap Davis. The dirt is still mine.